trust, for instance. I work on that with physician leaders, all around the country, and they're just like, well, yeah, no, duh. And I'm like, oh, no. This is not that kind of trust.
Duh.
Yeah, duh is really important. And I spend way more time than you would think I would have to on helping people understand what trust really looks like as a currency is what I call it.
Welcome to the Leadership Currency Podcast, the podcast dedicated to helping leaders be free from the nonsense that keeps them from being their best self, centered around discussions about leadership development through the lens of ancient truth and timeless wisdom. And now your host, Dr. Doug McKinley.
Hello, my name is Doug McKinley, and welcome to the Leadership Currency Podcast. We're going to be talking about a term that's, I think, a great term, and it's called organizational health. My guest today is Keith Hadley, and he's a colleague and a recent friend, and just somebody that I think is going to be a great inspiration to you if you work for or lead an organization where you want to create psychologically healthy workplaces. So the way they define a healthy organization is one that's all about eliminating politics, confusion from its environment. As a result, productivity and morale soar, and good people almost never leave. That sounds great, right? Well, in this interview, Keith, I get a chance to just pick his brain. He works for the Table Group, which is Patrick Lencioni's consulting arm. And he just has some great insights and terrific energy, and I think you'll enjoy this interview. All right, so thank you, Keith, for joining the podcast today. Just tell us, who are you, and how did you find yourself where you are?
Oh, my goodness. Well, thank you, Doug. It's really a pleasure to be here, and we've had some opportunities to work together, and it's been great getting to know you. Happy to be on this podcast with you.
Thank you.
I'm Keith Hadley. I'm based here in Chicago. Your question to me was like, who are you? And that's such a hard question to answer.
What's your story?
That seems like that'd be a really easy question.
You're writing the story, so however you want to write it.
Yeah. Married, 3 kids, grew up in the area, born in Minnesota. I studied history and French in college. Not the history of France, but history and French. I had no idea that I'd end up doing this kind of work. Okay. In fact, I thought I would be a high school history teacher. My dad was a high school principal, so it was a paradigm I understood.
Okay.
Nobody in my background was in the business world. They were farmers, missionaries, doctors, teachers, healthcare workers. And so the idea of working in the business world was something that I just felt I would be like in a beige cubicle farm at an insurance company somewhere.
So how did it happen?
So I when I was in college, I took one of these like career assessments, and it said you'd be good at international business. And I thought, well, what is that? And
there's history involved in international, right?
Exactly. So I ended up meeting a guy in my community who had a small consulting firm that did international business development, and the wall had just come down, NAFTA had just been signed.
Oh.
And he was looking for an intern. And I was like, I would love to do an internship. I have no idea what that means. And so the great thing about being an intern is that nobody expects you to know anything, and exactly. I certainly didn't.
Yeah, it's perfect.
But I ended up working for him for 8 years. His name was Alan Cheshire, and he eventually sold his practice to a much larger firm. And then I found myself at this big consulting tax and audit firm called McGladrey & Pullen. Now it's called RSM. And learned a ton. So what I ended up doing there was strategic planning, was international business development. We had, as young consultants, they had 3 hats that we had to wear. And so the 3 hats I ended up wearing over that 8 years was strategic planning, facilitation, looking at growth, and,
I assume you went on, did you get the degree in that, or no, you got it in history and French?
No, history and French.
So they trained you.
Yeah, they trained me.
By them. Huh.
Yeah, okay. Years later I got my MBA, and I was like, oh, that's what they were talking about.
I understand that. Yeah. I do.
So my 3 hats were strategic planning,
all right,
business development or marketing, and then organizational development. And when I would partner up with some of our OD leaders, that's when I really kind of fell in love with this space.
Well, because you came from a teacher, right?
Yeah, exactly. Just like Anyway, so that's how I kind of got launched my career. I ended up leaving that. I got sick of the chargeable hour, always chasing chargeable hours. Ended up at Moody Bible Institute, and was there 7 years in a learning and development role. And
working for them.
Yeah.
Oh,
I was in the HR department at Moody.
I don't think I didn't know that. All right.
And that's when I first discovered Pat's materials. And
Sure.
And then I left there, went to Career Builder. I was there for 8 years. And then, long story, or it's actually a pretty short story, but that's when Table Group reached out, is when I was still at Career Builder.
Career Builders.
Yeah.
I want to say this because it sounds fun coming off my tongue, but this is one of the hottest consulting companies, I think, in the U.S. for sure, the Table Group.
Well, thank you.
So I think it is. So how did they found you through Career Builders? And
No, well, I'm super grateful.
I'm a little jealous. You know that I am. So not that I'm too old now, but I'm a little jealous.
It is true. When I was still at Moody, I ended up, meeting Pat at the Christian Management Association conference, and I saw him at the Global Leadership Summit.
Sure.
And I started tracking Table Group website, that would be my dream job.
Right.
But how do you ever get introduced there? And
I still have those fantasies. Yes,
right. So it is just something, man. Yeah. When I look back, I think it was a desire that God put on my heart to do this kind of work. And then just it came about in a way that only he could have brought it about. Mm-hmm. I ended up hiring a consultant as part of a team to help me with a really big project at Career Builder, and introduced all of these consultants that were helping us serve a really big client of ours called Ronstad. And I had everybody read The Advantage because I want to do this Advantage kind of work with this client. Mm. We were helping them with change management and employment branding and all kinds of things. And I thought Advantage was a good, if you want to be a good employer,
sure,
you actually need to be a healthy employer. And then later, this consultant, Dominic Perry, he ended up meeting Pat at another event, and Pat ended up engaging with him to help launch the Amazing Parish. And at some point, Dominic mentioned to Pat that I had introduced him to The Advantage. And then that led to we're actually looking for a guy in Chicago, and now would be a great time. And so that's how the introduction came.
And how many years ago was that now?
That was 2015, so 8 years ago.
Wow.
So that should have been a shorter story. I'm sorry. That was a longer story.
I'm fascinated.
Yeah, but
now the summit is where I first got introduced to Pat as well.
Okay.
Was that, he was already such a prolific author, but
yep.
Was that helpful to the organization? Did that platform give him any boost? Do we know?
Oh,
he's
sure.
very popular.
Pat's a very prolific author, very prolific speaker.
Yeah.
But I think, every year that he's at the Global Leadership Summit, that ends up being one of the biggest audiences that he'll speak to.
I would think so. I was just curious.
Yeah.
I forget what they're at. They were over 100,000.
Yeah.
Every time. I don't know if they were last summer, but
yeah. And Pat's messages are just so simple,
right?
And they just resonate so quickly.
Yep.
And so, it was not a hard decision to join the Table Group, even though it wasn't an easy moment to do it. We're still independent consultants, and so
there's no security. That's for sure.
it was definitely changing a lifestyle, but I love it.
Now, people don't realize, they say it on the podcast all the time, but there's really only about 10 employees at the Table Group, right? The rest of it are this sort of massive, you talked about a partner in Italy and
Zurich,
Zurich, yeah. So there's this big network of people, and then I joined the Kappa Pro a few years ago, which is how we met, which is an extended network. But
Pat's thing is that, anybody can pick up these books and consult. And that that is true to a degree. Now, I've loved working with you because you get it, and not anybody can provide really good advice. And but the frameworks and the principles in the 5 dysfunctions of a team, or the 4 obsessions of an effective executive, or death by meeting, they're really simple ideas, and they can provide a framework that, if you've had those kinds of life experiences, you can use these frameworks to help explain what's going on in a company or in an organization. And so Pat has always said, man, read the book and just start consulting. And I had some experience doing that before I got to Table Group, and found, that was definitely true. Table Group itself is 10 people. They really oversee
It's
the working
amazing that they
genius,
do
the
all
writing
that
of the
with that.
books,
Yeah.
Pat's speaking engagements, all the response to the inquiries that people come in with, and then there's around 50 of us that have been asked to be principal consultants that are on the website, and
Right.
it's an amazing privilege.
You're the ones that are out actually doing the change. Some of the 10 do consulting still. It sounds like
Yeah,
from the podcast.
yeah. But they would describe themselves as an idea company.
Yeah.
And then we are the ones doing the real application of the
hands on the
consulting.
feet.
Yep.
Probably-
And I loved what Kappa Pro did because it brought people out of the woodwork.
Everywhere.
Right.
I know.
Just like, oh my gosh,
Hundreds of us. I know. I don't
that
know where they ended
we're
up, but-
just we end up building some incredible relationships with just such a great network. And I know here in Chicago, we had a group that would meet every month.
Still does, by the way.
Yeah, we still meet every month. like 15, 12 to 15 people on this little network. So it's a good.
We only had 4 last month, so
good
we're
community.
working on it. But
Yeah.
I'm still working it. I think the naked consulting is, if people are listening and they're saying, "Oh, I should just read a book." If you can, it's also in how you deliver, right. So if you don't bring that humility and that vulnerability to the consulting, I don't know that these tools will work.
Right.
It really won't. If you talk about it from a academic perspective,
Yeah. Right. These are things that when somebody asks you to prove it, they're saying that as though one could prove it, but what I always lean on is hey, if take the trust factor. If I were to ask you your level of trust with your next door neighbor on either side of your house, could you quantify it?
Mm-hmm.
Could you do something to increase it by 13% over the next 2 months?
Right.
No. But which neighbor has the key to your house?
right. Which one doesn't and
Which
why?
one doesn't and why? So these are qualitative things, but they are true and they're human. And if we think they don't apply to work, if we're working in a healthcare setting or in a school or a business, they absolutely apply. So I think a lot of our work is just to help people really apply the things that they know to be true anyways.
Absolutely.
They just don't know what buttons to press and what levers to pull.
Yeah. Well, I would say that's what's made the difference for me.
Yeah.
Is it just happened to connect with my heart in a way that it was very natural and gave me. And I know Pat on one of his podcasts talked about that he's met Jim Collins, and he said, I'm kind of embarrassed because this isn't this scientific, but I've always I think he said it at the summit. I've always loved it that Jim Collins said there's something called face validity, and if it works, you need to go with it. And I've always said that, this isn't science, but it's actually very helpful, and useful, and simple.
Yeah, absolutely.
Hard to do, but simple.
Right.
So, well, thank you for all you're doing, and certainly thanks for the way in which you've, adopted me, and just by virtual, through COVID, right? I think your Kappa Pro started during that time, so it's been fun.
Yeah.
Now I forget where we're going to go, so we'll just jump back on here. So, you told us that. So, what is organizational health? Prior to, frankly, Kappa Pro, I hadn't really embraced that term. I'm a consultant. I do leadership development and coaching, which What is organizational health? And help us understand why it's different.
The way I'm wired is I'm a big picture person, so I need to have a framework.
You use the term OD, so let's talk about that versus organizational health. I don't know if they're the same.
Oh man, well, a healthy organization is one that has minimal confusion and minimal politics. And that is just the simplest way to describe it, right? If there's no confusion. First of all, it's impossible to get to no confusion because we are operating in an environment that's constantly moving, constantly changing. There's always uncertainty, and so people are always confused about something. And so a healthy organization is really intentional about minimizing confusion, about strategy, about focus, about direction, about roles, etc., and then minimizing politics and.
So this is the model?
Yeah.
I interrupted you. I'm sorry. But this is the model is minimal confusion and minimal politics.
Right.
I can remember that. Those are two
it's
good
so
things.
simple, right? It's just really, really hard to do. And so I've only a couple of times in this work bumped into environments where there was like overt sabotage, or people were literally trying to undermine each other. So the kind of politics we usually see is just like people holding back when they should be leaning in.
Right.
People not saying something when they should say something, or changing what they're going to say based on who's in the room. And so when you combine politics and confusion, then you have this like health tax that you're paying. So any effort, any resource, any investment that you're making, there's a discount factor of 10%, 20%, 50%. Maybe some of the worst environments we've seen, 80%, where you're trying really hard, but you're not getting anywhere. And it's because people are cynical, they're jaded, they don't believe you, or they're not cynical, they're not jaded, but they don't know what they should be working on, or they're working on the wrong things, or they're working on different things. And so healthy organizations minimize those two things.
And I'm going back to your neighbor illustration, right?
Yeah.
It's so simple. It's right there. So why do you give the keys to your house to the neighbor on the right, but not to the left?
Right.
Well, it's not because you think they're trying to burn your house down.
Right.
It's probably something that you don't understand, or the way they park their car, or they don't bring their trash cans in soon enough for you, or they don't cut their yard the way you want them to.
Yeah.
But it's just we don't understand, and it's a tax.
Yeah.
It's so simple. It's right there.
Right.
Huh.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's org health. The next 4 words that I would add is team, clarity, communication, and systems. Right. So if I'm a CEO today, if I've just gotten a big promotion in the hospital where I work, step number 1, build a cohesive team.
Yep.
Start building trust with the people that you're leading. Step number 2, find out what they're confused about and make it clear. Step number 3, over communicate the heck out of it. Yeah. Nobody has ever left an organization saying those people communicated way too much with me. We slip up on communication because we are trying to be efficient, and so we say it once, or we put it in writing. We want to be clear, so we put it in an email. We want to be efficient, so we say it once, but people need to hear things over and over again. And then systems, every leader has to lean on some basic human systems. Sometimes they've been created for you by human resources. Other times they're systems that you create yourself around how you hire people, how you coach them, how you manage them, how you give feedback, how you would mentor somebody, or even the other direction, how you might start
the human systems, not the operational systems.
Right. The human systems. We were chatting earlier about customer or employee experience. That's how we experience an organization, is through these touch points.
Right.
And so are the touch points we have with our people reinforcing the things that we said we're trying to be clear about?
And this is right on the website.
Yep.
It's got a circle with like a cross in the middle and the 4 quadrants. It's right there.
Yeah.
We all see it.
Yep.
And yet people need to hire people like us to help them facilitate these conversations, not because it's complex, but why? Why is that tax so taxing to us that we can't?
Yeah.
These are not brilliant concepts, right?
No, they're not. Practical. I think it's because they need our help to see that the root cause of the issue that they're having and the solution to the issue they're having are probably embedded in one of those 4 quadrants. Now,
and they just don't want to believe it, or it seems too simple.
It seems too simple, or they need somebody to give them the courage to make a hard decision, or somebody they can just have an objective conversation with to say, yeah, that's probably what's happening. I had a call this morning with a client, and this client expressed his frustration again with his head of operations, and this is maybe the 10th conversation we've had about it, and we've done maybe 4 offsites together, and this guy's always showed up the same way. And I just asked him, I said, look, if we do 1 more offsite together, or if we do 10 more offsites together, how many of those offsites will this person still be on the team with those behaviors? Mm-hmm. And there's really only 2 options here. Either this guy changes his behavior, or you need to change the person. So do you want to have 1 more, 2 more offsites, 5 more, 10 more? Like, how many more do you want to do this for?
You asked the provocative question.
Yeah.
So courage, I've studied courage my whole life. I think it's a big, people ask me, like one of my favorite sayings is have the courage to be imperfect.
Yeah.
Which is why, why I like Patrick Lencioni, right?
Yeah.
Alfred Adler is where I trained and got my PsyD degree, and Adler coined that phrase.
Yeah. Oh, that's
not
awesome.
the only one, but one of them in the early 1920s, I think, is when he first wrote about it. I think courage is it's a slippery thing. I don't know.
Yeah.
So you think?
Give me 3 sentences on at least. Like, what does that mean? I love that idea.
Courage
to be imperfect.
Yeah. So it's the idea that it's vulnerability, right? It's the idea that courage really isn't about getting it right. It's about Brene Brown talks about, are you trying to be right or to get it right?
Yeah.
Right. So people want to give the
oh
right
my
answer.
Gosh. If people could embrace that concept.
Yeah. It's big. And so Adler coined it. His basic idea was that as a young child, when we're born developmentally, we're overcoming inferiority. He coined the term inferiority complex. It wasn't Freud, it was Adler. And so he said to thrive and strive as a young child, we need courage.
Yep.
Courage to stand up and walk.
Right.
Well, now Brene Brown, 100 years later, talks about you got to learn how to rise up after you fall. I mean, she's just so simple in her own research as well.
Yep.
So it's about, am I willing to take risks and jump out into the big ocean and fully aware that there are sharks and other things, but there's also this beautiful place to live.
So you've worked with a lot of leaders. How many leaders would you say, when they're first put into leadership, or maybe even after they've been in leadership for a while, struggle with that imposter syndrome?
I'm trying to not say all of them.
Right.
I'm trying to think of a reason not to say all of them. I think most of them.
Yeah.
Men are less likely to call it that. Women are
Right.
it seems to be okay to say that for women, but not men. Men would say, I'm misunderstood. That's usually my first clue. Well, tell me about being misunderstood.
Right.
Yeah, but they don't feel, the curse of comparison strikes us all.
Yeah.
Right.
Yep.
We're going to all be in there. But I think the courage to be imperfect allows me to quit trying to be perfect, first of all. And perfectionism is a huge drainer, right? If we're trying to do it.
Well, perfectionism causes you to cover up, right?
All the time.
And so we see that on teams all the time, is that people, they know they're not right, and so they try to cover up that they're not right, or that something's not right, or something could have been better. And rather than just having the courage to say, hey, let's be honest here, we're just making this up as we go along. I challenge teams with that all the time. It's like, you guys, you're not fooling anybody. Everybody around you knows that you're just making this up as you go along, and that's okay. Like, you're trying to run this $60 million, business, or you're trying to run this, giant system. But I'll often ask, show of hands, how many of you right now are in the biggest role you've ever been in your life? And most of the time, they're in their biggest role.
Right.
And when you're in that biggest role, then you have to acknowledge that you're making it up. And you're making it up with some really good experience.
Oh, I love
some
that.
Great training.
Right.
But
you've never done it before.
But we've never done it before.
Right.
Like we were talking about a leader that we both know, that we both worked with, and he's had some amazing success in his career in the healthcare space. And now he's at a new company. And guess what? He's never done this before. He did the other thing, so he has the confidence, but he also knows that he's trying to get it right, not trying to be right.
Yeah, but when they go to interview for the job, they call it behavioral interviewing. They're supposed to talk about what they've already done.
Right.
And yet we're hiring you to do something you've never done.
Right.
And I don't know. Do they know? I think people think others do think they know what they're doing. That's the imposter syndrome, right?
Well, yeah, we always, on the teams that I've worked with, they hire a new executive and say, wow, that's awesome. Who'd you bring in? Head of sales, why him? Oh, because he did it here, and there.
Right.
He has this proven track record. And so they show up and the whole team looks at them expecting them to just be awesome and to get it right.
Right, the first time.
It's like, oh, tell us what was wrong with our go-to-market strategy. Tell us what was wrong with our processes and systems. Oh, how can we get compliance right? Or how can we get safety back on track? You did it at this other system before. And the honest answer is, I don't know. I know some things that we would try because we've tried these before and they worked. But what we're going to experience here, there's so many unknowns, And if we could embrace that honesty or have the courage to be imperfect, I like that.
The
That's a
Alan
good new
McKinley
phrase.
story. I don't know if I'm saying his name right.
Alan Mullally, yeah.
Mullally, yeah. So Patrick got to interview him, and I've read about him on the books, right? I don't know if he was humble, but as the story goes, the people that were most vulnerable are the ones he put around him. Yeah. The ones that kept saying everything was green, right? Everything was fine, and they were making it up and not true. Right. Are the ones that struggled with him. Yeah, yeah. So I don't know. Did you get to meet him? Is he a humble person?
I shook his hand once, and he's a very humble person.
Yeah. That'd be my guess, right?
But it was funny because he said something that on the surface of it sounded like it wasn't humble at all. But as I've thought about it, it really was incredibly humble. We did the CEO roundtable afterwards where people could just ask him questions real time. And so somebody asked him, "Hey, Alan, how do you think of failure? You know, how do you deal with failure?" And he paused for a really long time. And he just said, "You know what? I just don't see it that way. I don't think of anything as failure. Like I've never failed." You know, and it was like, "Well, what do you mean?" He's like, "No, he goes, I'm an engineer. We make a plan. We work the plan. If the plan isn't working, we make a new plan. Now, if we're not working the plan, well, then we hold each other accountable to work the plan." And so it's like his mind was always in this mode of like, we're trying to get it right. Like he never claimed to be right. He was just like, well, let's try this. And if that doesn't work, then let's try that. And let's negotiate a new contract with the union, and let's figure out which, plants to keep open and which ones to close. And if we get it wrong, well, then we'll adjust. So I love that. It was so humble. He's like, "No, we're not. This isn't about failure."
But it could have sounded like arrogance. Like
it could have sounded like arrogance, but he was just saying, like, you never know at the beginning. You make the best plan you can, you work it, but it's not always going to work, and you adjust.
Yeah, I don't want to get into religion or anything, but I grew up in the Southern Baptist methodology, and there were people that they talked about sin that way. Well, I don't sin because I'm living under grace, and so I think it's just a fascinating way to think about a construct. Is if it's forward focused and we're living free to be our best self, we have the luxury to think about constructs that way. Right. But if we're not, if we're really legalistic in our, we have to perform and earn our value. I don't know how to do it. That's a hard way.
No, exactly. I think that's a very good transferable principle. Yeah. I either live who I am because of who I am, based on my relationship with God, with my Savior, right? And that's my identity. Or I have to continually earn my place at that table through my own excellence. Yeah. And I've used the analogy, if you get drafted by the Chicago Bears, right? And you sign that contract, like at that very moment, you are a Chicago Bear.
That's right.
And that's your identity. That's who you are. You don't even have the right uniform yet. You haven't attended any practices. You don't know the plays. And as you embrace that identity of who you are, you get to then become more and more like a really high-performing Chicago Bear. Right. But it's not based on like, well, if you can win a Super Bowl with us, then we'll finally call you a Bear.
Yeah, I love that analogy. I hear coaches say that are about to be fired. They're like, well, I'm the head coach. I'm preparing for next year. Yeah. If they fire me, then I won't do that. But right now, I mean, it's so funny. These people push the interviews, right? Right. Yeah, your identity. I think identity is key here. Yeah. So I don't know what the relationship between courage and identity is, but my guess is there's something. But if you believe in who you are and you believe that what you are doing matters to the people you serve, right? I don't know. Go ahead. I'm just thinking out loud.
No, that's good. I've sometimes we work a lot with teams that struggle with vulnerability, being invulnerable, and I'll sometimes just challenge a team and say, "Hey, look, you're at this table because you deserve to be here." Right? Like you've earned the seat that you're sitting in. Right. So just like live into the fact that you are the one sitting in that seat. And it's okay to share with your colleagues around this table, like, what are the areas that you're struggling in? Where are you most, afraid right now? Where are you most exposed, most vulnerable? And I'm not talking about, just sharing your greatest fears, but just like, hey, if I'm head of operations, I'm really concerned right now about supply chain. or, hey, I'm head of finance, and I just need to acknowledge we haven't done as good a job at providing, real-time data. And I'm working on that, but, I'm going to share with you the problems that I see in my own area so that I can get some grace, get some help, or just rather than have you discover it. And what we found is when people are vulnerable with each other, what they invariably find is that everybody else is already aware of that. They just didn't know whether they'd be willing to admit it.
Right.
Yeah. So you're not surprising anybody. It's like, yeah, no, we knew your financial reporting was pretty bad, but we're happy to know that you know it, and we're happy to know that you're working on it, that you're aware of it, you're working on it, and if there's anything we can do to help, we're here to help.
And yet when you asked me how many of my clients suffer from imposter syndrome, I had a hard time saying,
yeah,
not all of them. So I think there is this aversion to the very thing we're speaking to.
Yeah, yeah.
A natural proclivity to hide, to protect, and to fight for or earn.
Right.
Maybe it's earning. Maybe that's the struggle. Is we feel like we have to earn it. What have you done for me lately, kind of thing? Because it is out there. That mantra is out there.
Right. I worked with a global team once where everybody on the team was English as a second language. And so I got to that concept of, we were talking about the 5 dysfunctions of a team. We were building the base of the pyramid, talked about vulnerability-based trust.
Yep.
And I just paused. I was like, all right, I'm going to make sure everybody's on the same page what vulnerability-based trust
I did the same
means.
thing in Italy last fall. I was like, oh no, how's this going to go?
Right. Like, yeah. So I just said, hey, let's just go around the table in your own native language. What word would you use? And so, we got to the guy from Asia. I think he was from Singapore. I'm trying to remember. We got to the guy from Brazil, got to the guy from Germany. We got to the guy from Poland. And the guy from Poland said, okay, I would use this word. And if you're Polish and you're listening, I don't remember what the word was. And I said, okay, so in Polish, what does that mean? And he said, well, it would be the word you'd use like if a warrior stepped out onto a battlefield with a shield and then they put their shield down. It's that word. And I was like, oh my gosh, yes, that's the exact word.
Drop your armor.
Yeah. And so then it made me think, so on this executive team or on this team, do I need to bring my shield with me to this meeting?
Yes.
And, and do we each need to bring our shields? Can we put our shields? Can we all just like pinky promise and agree to drop our shields and just have a real conversation about the needs of the business, the needs of the department, the needs of the hospital, the needs of the system, or do I have to have my shields up?
So good, Keith. Right.
And I think most of our executives show up
with shields.
With shields because they're trying to protect their pride, their reputation. They're afraid. They don't want to be exposed. And so everybody's kind of then, guarded and filtered.
Brene Brown calls it armored.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know how to, I know how to speak to it. And I think the Table Group has given us language through Patrick's books.
Yeah.
To be able to talk about it. But I do think some people want to put their shield down.
Right.
I'm convinced of that, especially after working through our process, right?
Right.
After you go through a 2-day offsite, and yet they don't know if their teammates are going to, so they don't want to go first. That's why we need courage.
Right.
So
I was saying, like, worst case scenario, there you are at that table, and you have a fear of being exposed, and the reason you're afraid of being exposed is that you, like, worst case scenario, you genuinely lack the competence to be there. Like, that would be hard because that happens. We work with businesses that scale, and the business scales faster than
they grew
the
out of
capacity,
their competency, right?
But even in that scenario, I think the person who is suffering from that, they know it, and it's really hard. And I've been in that position many times where, like, I was exposed because I was way out over my skis. I had no idea what I was doing, and I was faking it. And it would have been actually better in the long run just to call that out and, either get the help that I needed or get me into the right role. One of my colleagues worked with a team where the head of marketing, she was the CMO, and she just said, look, I'm not at this capacity yet. And she actually stepped down. She took a demotion, and they hired a new CMO that was sort of on an interim. And everything worked out really well in the company. The company is growing, and that CMO actually just retired, and they were able to promote that original woman back into that role. And, but she had the courage to just say,
I'm not ready.
I'm not ready for this. I'm not ready for the kind of growth that you're expecting.
And that's a shield down comment itself.
Totally.
Right.
Totally.
Of course, I'm not ready.
Yeah, and I'm sure it takes a hit on your ego. But, man, if you can be honest, then she could be so much more comfortable in the role that she was in, working for somebody that could mentor her. And
I've actually been a part of conversations where people were removed from that position because they couldn't do it, and they were relieved.
Right, exactly.
Thank you, because I'm trying to instill courage in the leader to have the conversation. They finally do it, and they're like, "Thank you. I've been trying to tell you that."
Yeah.
It's fascinating. You're like, "Wow."
Yeah.
And the leader wished they would have, done it yesterday, planted that tree yesterday, not today. But they did it. That's why you got to have these courageous conversations, is what I call them. But you guys, I don't know. There's a lot of courage in the work that you do, and I think we went on this sort of tangent because you brought this word courage to this conversation, and it's just such an important quality. If somebody asks me, "What do you need to be, healthy in life?" I'd say courage.
Yeah.
That's
what's so funny is the resistance that people have to doing this work is it's. I don't think I've ever done an offsite with the client where the words kumbaya, mamby-pamby, holding hands, we're going to do a trust fall. They always say it like, ha-ha, chuckle, chuckle. But I also know, they're really thinking that. And we will take steps early on to kind of reassure people that, no, we're not, believe me, there's nothing soft about this work. And then in reality, the thing that actually holds the team back is the lack of courage.
Yeah.
So
how ironic.
They look at us like, you're not going to ask us to do a bunch of hold hands and we just cry in front of each other, are you?
And Patrick says it almost every podcast. I'm like, why do people think? But he must get that feedback.
I think people have had a lot of bad experiences with trainers and with other consultants that, it's like, hey, let's talk about our spirit animals. And then, let's...
Well, I hear those mythologies as well.
So that stuff is out there, and so I think a lot of executives, if they've been in role for a while, they're gonna have a couple of those experiences, and we try to get in and really, and that's what I've appreciated about introducing you to clients is like, I know that you're going to be fast, practical, relevant. You know that this requires courage to do really hard things.
Yeah,
and so
Yeah, it's well, I probably benefited most from being a part of Kappa Pro is to have the confidence to my voice mattered, because I came from a coaching perspective where the client held most of the power, and I think we had this conversation. Coaching in the table group world is a little different than a lot of the ICF coaches are trained on. Yep, and I've always found that to be, although it can be therapeutic, it's not pushing the business forward. Right. And so I've really benefited from stepping up more and having my voice matter. It's not like imposter syndrome, but I didn't go get that MBA. Right. Yeah. Right? So I always think, well, I don't know, I have my own business, but I don't know how to run a $1 billion company, but I do know how people love each other better. Yeah. I do. Yeah. I will always tell the CEOs I work with, like, look, I could do your job. Right. Like, I'm not smart enough. I don't have enough. Especially CEO. That would be the one job I couldn't do. I could not do your job, but I can add a tremendous amount of value because we see these patterns and we see these things. Yeah. And so, but I think it's also for us as consultants to have the courage to, like, hey, I think I'm right, but I don't know that I'm right, and I don't need to be right. So, hey, I see this going on in your team. Right. Is this an issue? Do we need to talk about this? Right. Or, like, you know what? That guy you have on your team, that's your obstacle. Right. He's a real problem. I love that technique because I work a lot with docs or medical people, and I have no idea. Like, there's no way I could do what they do. And they know that. Right. But they pick up really quickly that I know how to help them do it better. Right. Right. How to get people, enroll people in the process with them to do it better. Right. So it takes that off the table right away. And the healthcare profession too is notorious for, very few healthcare leaders, if they came up through the ranks of healthcare, were trained in people management or organizational leadership. Even though there's so many parallels between
the human body and the systems that all have to be working well together for it to function. An organization is no different. It's just a body. It's a system made up of individual parts. And so, but yeah, my wife worked in healthcare. My mom worked in healthcare. My brother works in healthcare. And so I have so many stories of such dysfunctional healthcare decisions and environments.
And they're brilliant people. It has nothing to do with intelligence. It's just
I remember talking to a physician group recently, and it was a big physician group of radiologists, and I just asked about their leadership structure, and they have a brand new head of the practice and 2 deputies, and I got these guys, they're both radiologists, and I was like, okay, so what percentage of your time have they kind of cleared for you to work on the management side? Right. One guy was like 10%, and I was like, oh.
They call it carve-out time.
Yeah, so you have 10% carve-out time to lead this organization. How many people in the organization? Like several hundred. Like how many millions of dollars at stake? You're like, and you're going to do this with 10% of your time.
Right.
What does it even, you tell me, what does it even look like?
They don't know, right?
And so but he could do it more effectively following some simple guidelines. Right? You got to build a team. You got to get really clear about vision and direction. You got to hold people accountable.
One resistance question, then we got to wrap up. But I'm having the most trouble getting people to just. You've already brought it up and through the analogy of the shield, but trust is a concept that everybody wants others to give them, but they don't want. They want. They trust is earned. They really believe trust is earned. And I call, you guys call it predictive based trust.
Yep.
You earn it over time, but we don't have time to earn trust.
Right.
Not in this environment. I just learned that there's a VUCA environment. Now there's a BANI environment. Did you hear about that?
No, I haven't heard BANI.
BANI. It's brittle. I forget the A. The N is nonlinear, and the I is incomprehensible. Anxiety. Brittle, anxious. Nonlinear and incomprehensible. And it came out of
my goodness,
the COVID world. We've gone from VUCA world to a BANI world.
I'm going to write that down.
Yeah, that's a good one. So
yeah,
I'm like, okay, right? So let's start with trust, because you want to talk about a BANI environment, there's no trust.
Right.
No trust. All right, we're going to all armor up, and we'll kill each other with our swords.
Right. Well, the thing with trust is somebody's got to go first.
Yeah, that's
it. And I have very rarely seen a case where somebody goes first with vulnerability, and not everybody, but most everybody on the team responds in
Does
kind.
it have to be the leader?
No. I mean, it's great if it's a leader. And if you're listening to this and you are a leader, please know that that's your job.
Help yourself.
Help yourself.
And
right?
us.
But it's amazing when you see that courageous person on the team just go first and say, well, you know what? All right. If we're really going to talk, okay, here's the deal. I had a team recently where we were going through our team assessment. One of the questions, question number 8 is, team members point out behaviors that hold the team back.
Right.
And she said she's soft-spoken, introverted, if you're into Myers-Briggs, ISTJ, and she was just like, we don't do that on this team. We don't really call out behaviors. But she said, but we should do that more. So I think we should do it right now. In fact, let's start with me. I want you guys to call out the behaviors that I do that are holding the team back, because I really want to know. Let's just start with me. And I was like, okay, that wasn't on the agenda, but let's do it.
That's what a good facilitator does. Right?
Yeah, and the team did, and they gave her feedback, and not all of it was pleasant for her, but I was like, any surprises? No. All right, well then, and then I just looked around the table, and then somebody was like, okay, I'll go next, and then it was like, I'll go next. And everybody did it. And they still talk about that moment where, this one leader just decided, and she wasn't the leader of the team. She was on the team, but I'll go first. We should do this more often. And if it's hard to do, then I'm willing to go first. Or, hey, let's all talk about what could be, a decision that we need to make that's going to be a hard decision, or let's talk about a problem in our area of responsibility, or let's ask each other at least some questions about what's going on in each other's worlds that could affect the whole team. We like to say that the predominant paradigm we see in teams is that everybody's in their lane. Stay in your lane. And staying in your lane is a great metaphor for role clarity. Like division of labor is a good thing. Like, let's all be clear about what our roles are, but it's not a good metaphor for a team.
Right.
You know, for the team, we say we are in the same boat.
Right.
And there's no such thing as, hey,
That's
your side of the boat is sinking. It's like, no. It's like, if this boat sinks, we all go down. So if there's a hole on my side of the boat and you see it and I don't, call it out. If I see it and you don't, I'm going to let you know that I see it so that you know I'm working on it. If I'm working on it and it's not working, I'm going to ask for your help.
Right.
You know, so the whole team, it's like everybody's responsible for not letting this boat sink. And so, but people have formalized this, well, out of respect for you, and, you know, I don't want to step out of my lane. I would never call that out. You say, no, like, invite people into your world. Let them see the things you're concerned about, what you're focused on, what you're working on. Invite feedback. All that requires vulnerability.
You have a lot of good techniques. Is that one of them? Like, stay in your lane? No.
Yeah,
like,
exactly.
I love where you're going with that, because in the spirit of vulnerability, I've sometimes, being a psychologist, I've tried to provoke people to go first.
Yeah.
And it just bombs, right? You just, if I just, all right, we're going to just be vulnerable. Like, well, then they put up their armor.
Yeah.
And so it really does have to happen more organically or more naturally, because a few times I've been able to make it work. But
so. If we have time, there's one little construct that I've done, which is around it's just a series of questions, and they're easy questions until you
I don't
get
know
to
if the
last
audience
one.
has time, but I want to listen. So. Sorry,
it's really quick. I just say like, hey, theoretically, is it possible for somebody to be a really good person, Doug? They're a good person, they mean well, but there's just some aspect of their leadership that's lacking in its effect. Is that possible theoretically?
Sure.
It's like, yeah, okay, good. What if that was you? What if you were that person? You're a good person.
Then I want to run and hide now.
Like, if that was you, would you want to know it?
Right.
And everybody's like, yeah, I'd want to know it. It's like, great. How would you prefer to find out about it? And when push comes to shove, it's like, I'd like to discover it in the mirror. Like, oh, I see it myself. If I'm not seeing it, I want one of my trusted few of my inner circle, somebody that I know cares about me. I'd want them to point it out. And it's like, okay, what if neither of those two things is happening? Then who are the people most aware of that limitation? And it's like, well, your peers and your subordinates.
Right.
It's like, good. Okay, so if you weren't finding out about it in the right way, or maybe you found about it in a shabby way, like gossiping, or you saw it in an email that somebody wrote about you.
Or it was too harsh.
Or it was too harsh. It was delivered poorly.
Right.
As much as it hurts, would you still want to know it? And why would you want to know it? It's like, well, so I could fix it. Right. It's like, none of us want to be ineffective. So, all right.
Or so I can disagree with it and make you look silly for saying it.
So
just depends on my motive.
Yeah. So at the end of the day, I'm like, look, all of us have things that we could be doing we could improve on. And so rather than like make it so difficult for people to bring that information to you, just be vulnerable and ask, or say, hey, here's what I'm working on. If that's the right thing, let me know. If you want me to work on something else, let me know. So those are little ways I've tried to make it easier for people to be vulnerable.
I'm going to name this the Hadley technique. So
yes,
that's good.
There you go.
But so the basic idea, every leader should listen to this and try it. Say, do you believe it's possible for a person to be a good person and lack in some area of leadership?
Yeah.
That's the setup.
Yep.
Sure.
Yeah, of course.
And if it were you, would you want to know?
Yeah.
That's so simple, Keith.
Right. And as a consultant, you're actually paying me to tell you.
It's the Keith technique. It's the Keith technique. Because Hadley's too hard to say. So
yeah. And then how would you prefer to find out about it?
How would you prefer to find out about it? That's good.
And then, so how about make it easier for people to tell you? Give them permission. It's like, hey, if I'm doing something that's like not working for you, let me know, and I'll try to change it, because I want to be the best CEO I can be, or I want to be the best department manager that I can be.
And if you can't see me, because this isn't a video, but I'm writing notes right now, because I think everybody should listen to what Keith's saying and try it. I think it's lovely. I've never thought about it that way. It's a beautiful way to set that up.
Yeah. Yeah.
All right.
So be vulnerable, leaders.
Yeah, please. All right. I'd like you to close with this. I got a smile just writing the question too, so I'm going to ask it. What recently is a case or a situation that just made you smile and you thought, okay, I know this works? It brought a dance to your heart. Like, okay, That was great. Like, just leave us with something that made you smile and said, it wasn't all about you. It wasn't even about them. It worked. And you were just, you had joy.
Oh man, there are so many examples, but I'll tell the story of a client that you and I worked together on.
Okay.
And this is a leader, part of a global organization, but he's a leader locally. And can we name names?
I don't know.
I think so.
First names for sure.
His name is Fernando, and he works for the great company called De Laval, and he's head of North America. And he's a courageous leader. He's a vulnerable leader, but he really decided to kind of live out the Stephen Covey principle of like focus on what you can control, and you'll have greater influence over things that you can't control. And somebody else in his organization, one of his peers, actually came to him and just said, I have seen a difference in your team. They're easier to work with. What is it that you're working on? Yeah. What is it that you're doing? And he was able to share with him just some of the changes that he had made in his leadership.
And he has or most of it came from the work you're doing with him.
Well, but it came from himself. It's like who he was at his core, and it was like just some of those nudges that you give in the right direction when somebody wants to make a change. Say, hey, try this instead, and they embrace it and they do it. So the people that have the least to work on end up making the most progress, and he's one of those kinds of leaders. But it just brought me so much joy that now there was others in his organization that were reaching out because they were seeing the impact of this work on his organization, and it was. Not just that their performance was better, but they were easier to work with. They seemed to have more joy. They seemed to enjoy each other more. It was just like a healthier team. Right. And so like that was a huge smile on my face when that happened. I was like, oh man, you can't make this stuff up.
And I'm smiling because I just recognized one of your gifts, because I tried to give you credit and you didn't take it. You gave your credit to your client, and you said, it's something he was doing, not me. Keith, that's you can't. I don't know how to teach that. So.
Yeah, that they are the heroes of their stories because it's hard to do what they do. Yeah, and these principles that we give them are easy in concept. They're hard to apply, and so when you meet somebody like him who has had the courage to really stick with it over time, it has a huge impact.
Well, thanks for having the courage to give that away. Yeah. And to give it to them and let them have it. So that's beautiful. Well, thanks for joining the Leadership Currency Podcast, and I hope you join us again soon. And thanks, Keith, for just being you.
All right. Thank you so much for having me. It's great.
All right. Thanks, everybody.
Hey, thanks for joining us today. If this podcast was encouraging, motivating, or provoking in useful ways, would you be willing to share it with someone you know who might need to hear this conversation? A review on your favorite podcast service is also always appreciated, and we'll see you next time.